I'd like to bring in our next guest, who is a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Dr. Amesh Adalja has been speaking out about the fears that infections will be spiking as China is changing its policy. Dr. Adalja, thank you so much for joining us. It is interesting to watch this big pivot coming through from China, from a hardline policy to what we're seeing now. And if you look under the hood, the question now becomes, is China ready for a cycle, a wave of high COVID infections, firstly? And importantly, does it have enough ICU capacity and resources to deal with this wave?
No, they're not ready, and I don't think they ever were going to be ready, because what's characterized their response to COVID-19 is not something based on science, but something based on politics and policy and keeping people in power and saving face. If they wanted to be ready, they could have been ready. They could have used Western vaccines. They could have built ICU capacity. They could have taught the population how to risk calculate in the world in which COVID-19 is never going to go away. But they did none of that. And now they're going to face those consequences. And they're still not allowing Western vaccines to be used. So to me, this is inexcusable and just a failure of the Chinese government to actually understand the science of COVID-19 and the benefits of some of the more potent vaccines, which they have refused to allow their citizens to be vaccinated with.
Okay, let's do some of, predictions in terms of the numbers. Have you done modeling in terms of what you expect in terms of severity of illnesses? And then importantly, what kind of numbers you're anticipating?
I'm not a modeler, but I have seen models that show that there's going to be an increase, a significant increase in Omicron cases as people socially interact. And that's not surprising. That number of cases was never going to be in question. The key thing for them is to be able to keep them away from high-risk individuals. And unfortunately, their highest risk people are not boosted, and the ones that are boosted with an inferior vaccine, and they have limited ICU capacity compared to many Western countries. So it's not so much the cases that I'm going to be watching. It's going to be how many people are getting hospitalized, what does the ICU capacity look like, how well are they using drugs like Paxlovid to keep people out of the hospital. But it's something that's unavoidable. This is a ubiquitous virus that everybody is going to get multiple times in their life. And I think people needed to know that and use the tools to stop it from causing severe disease. And unfortunately, in China, they never did that. They actually abdicated on that responsibility. And now they're in a dire situation of their own choosing.
It is interesting because China was, the first country to do something unprecedented like lock down an entire city. But it seems that China is behind in terms of experiencing COVID, facing it head on. And now the question becomes, what is their response going to be as cases rise? Do you believe that they might go back on a zero COVID policy, or at least embark on lockdowns as cases increase? And importantly, as we've seen in the rest of the world, a big strain on the healthcare system.
I do suspect that they will have to use some more mitigation measures because they may not have the proper levels of ICU capacity. However, it's important to remember that their zero COVID is not anything that was completely designed to block COVID. What it was doing was a major overreach of tracking the population, welding people into their houses, separating children from parents, forcing people to quarantine at camps and not at home. That's not normal types of ways to deal with COVID-19. What they need is a targeted approach to COVID-19 that actually deals with what spreads the virus, respecting the individual rights of the citizens. And I think maybe they have a chance here to get this right if they actually pivot and understand how to do this in a precision-guided manner to prevent their ICUs from getting overrun, but allow their people to actually live for once in 3 years.
I've also been finding it quite interesting to see the behavior since we've seen a relaxation of rules, that people are choosing to self-quarantine, choosing to stay home, as opposed to reporting cases. How much of this is going to depend on behavior?
A lot of this is going to depend on behavior because we know that it's social interaction that drives cases. And we know that if people are sick, they should be staying home, or if they have to be around people, that they should be wearing masks in crowded indoor places. Behavior also involves getting tested. Behavior involves being able to get vaccinated. Even if you're using a subpar vaccine, it is better than nothing, especially in those high-risk populations that have not been boosted. It's behavior that's going to seek drugs like Paxlovid. So behavior is going to play a role. And I think the Chinese have to recognize that they're going to have to risk calculate in a world in which COVID-19 is always going to be there. It's going to be there now in 2022. It's going to be there in 2024. It's going to be there in 2030. This is a virus that's ineradicable. We need to find a way to live with it. And I think the Chinese government has stunted the ability of the population to be able to do that by clinging to this zero COVID idea as if this was some kind of hurricane that was going to pass and not an endemic respiratory infectious disease.
And everyone was asking whether it was a sustainable way of dealing with COVID. Dr. Amesh Adalja, thank you very much for joining us.